Let's go back to where this all really started. For decades, the United States and Iran have been locked in a Cold War of threats, sanctions, and proxy battles. It never fully exploded until now. After Trump pulled the U.S. out of the Iran nuclear deal, the JCPOA, back in 2018, sanctions crushed Iran's economy. The Iranian rial collapsed. Millions of ordinary Iranians went poor. Food, medicine, basic goods, all became expensive. And yet, Iran kept enriching uranium, kept building missiles, kept funding groups like Hezbollah and Hamas across the Middle East. Then came October 7, 2023. Hamas attacked Israel. A brutal war followed in Gaza. Israel struck Hezbollah in Lebanon. Israel bombed Iran's consulate in Damascus. Iran fired missiles directly at Israel. The region was already burning. By June 2025, it escalated further. Israel launched what became known as the 12-Day War, a surprise air campaign that killed Iranian military leaders, nuclear scientists, and damaged Iran's air defenses. The U.S. joined in and bombed 3 of Iran's nuclear sites. Then a ceasefire. But not for long. Within hours, Iran retaliated. Hundreds of ballistic missiles and drones were launched at Israel, at U.S. military bases in Bahrain, Qatar, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE. A drone hit a British base in Cyprus. A missile entered Turkish airspace and had to be intercepted by NATO. Dubai International Airport, one of the busiest in the world, was damaged. Global flights across the Middle East almost entirely stopped. Iran then did something no one had dared do. It closed the Strait of Hormuz. 20% of the world's oil passes through that narrow strip of water. Oil prices surged past $100 a barrel. The global economy began trembling. Iran also attacked commercial ships attempting to pass through. The U.S. Navy sank an Iranian frigate in the Indian Ocean. The war had begun, and the world had changed. After weeks of devastating bombardment, both sides had taken serious hits. The U.S. had destroyed the bulk of Iran's military infrastructure: 19 Iranian ships, 1 submarine, nearly 2,000 military targets. Iran's air defenses were shattered. Its missile program was severely degraded. Its supreme leader was dead. A new supreme leader, Mojtaba Khamenei, the son of the assassinated Ali Khamenei, was rushed into power. But Iran was not finished. Iran had one remaining trump card: the Strait of Hormuz. As long as Iran threatened that strait, it had the world's attention. Oil prices stayed high. Global shipping was disrupted. Iran's field commanders were given more autonomy to operate militias in Iraq, Lebanon, and beyond. By late March 2026, Trump was growing impatient. He declared on March 9 that the war was very complete, pretty much, a claim that proved false quickly. Iran kept launching missiles. U.S. bases across the Middle East had been hit. By mid-March, at least 17 U.S. military sites had sustained damage. An estimated $800 million in damage to U.S. infrastructure. 15 American soldiers killed. Nearly 300 wounded. Trump then demanded unconditional surrender on March 6. He threatened to destroy Iran's entire infrastructure if the strait was not reopened. Behind the scenes, however, both sides were quietly talking. Pakistan stepped up as a mediator. Pakistani Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif and Army Chief Field Marshal Asim Munir began working between Washington and Tehran. On April 7, 2026, after weeks of brutal back and forth, the U.S. and Iran agreed to a 2-week ceasefire, brokered by Pakistan. VP J.D. Vance had already traveled to Islamabad for a first round of peace talks with Iranian representatives. The talks were difficult. Iran's 10-point counter-proposal clashed heavily with Washington's demands. Iran wanted reparations, sovereignty over the strait, security guarantees, and an end to U.S.-Israeli attacks. The U.S. wanted Iran to give up its nuclear program, limit its missiles, reopen the strait, and cut ties with armed groups. The gap between the two positions was enormous. And then the ceasefire itself began fracturing. Israel launched fresh attacks in Lebanon. Iran paused Hormuz traffic in response. Ships were once again being blocked. The U.S. imposed a naval blockade on Iran's ports. Iran's foreign minister called the blockade an act of war and a violation of the ceasefire. Now we are at April 21, 2026. The original 2-week ceasefire was supposed to expire Wednesday night. A A second round of talks in Islamabad was being planned. VP Vance was going to lead the U.S. delegation, alongside Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner. Iran was supposed to send a team. Then it all stalled. Iran's leadership publicly said it would not negotiate under the shadow of threat. Iran's top negotiator warned that Tehran had prepared new cards on the battlefield. Iran's UN mission asked the Security Council to intervene. Conflicting signals, some Iranian officials showing openness, others flatly refusing. And then Trump acted. He posted on Truth Social. The ceasefire was extended, not for a fixed number of days, but indefinitely, until such time as Iran's leaders can submit a unified proposal. His exact reasoning: Iran's government is seriously fractured. Pakistan had asked for more time. So the window stays open, for now. The naval blockade remains. The U.S. military stays on full readiness. But bombs are not dropping yet. Vance's trip to Pakistan was immediately canceled. The White House said further updates would come only when there is something to announce. Oil markets reacted instantly. Brent crude surged past $101 before the announcement, then pulled back to $98 after. Every word out of Washington is moving global markets. Iran's response: Iran's parliament speaker called Trump's statement a push toward surrender or warmongering. Iran's foreign ministry blamed inconsistent U.S. behavior as the reason talks are failing. Publicly, Tehran refuses to be seen bowing to American pressure. Analysts point out that Trump's own admission that Iran's government is seriously fractured is actually a significant intelligence signal. It means Washington itself is not sure who speaks for Iran, or who can actually sign and enforce a deal that where does this go from here? Right now, there are three realistic roads ahead. Each one changes the Middle East and the world in very different ways. Road 1. A deal is reached. This is the scenario both sides are publicly pretending to work toward. Iran somehow unifies internally. A delegation arrives in Islamabad. Vance, Witkoff, and Kushner sit across the table from Iranian negotiators. They hammer out a framework. What would that deal look like? Based on what has been floated, Iran freezes its nuclear program under international monitoring. The Strait of Hormuz is formally reopened. The U.S. lifts the naval blockade. Sanctions relief begins in phases. Iran's support for armed proxies is curtailed. In exchange, Iran gets survival, security guarantees, a path toward economic recovery, and it avoids total destruction of its infrastructure. Is this likely? Barely. The two sides are miles apart. Iran will not publicly surrender. Trump will not give Iran anything that looks like a concession. The domestic politics on both sides make compromise politically dangerous for whoever signs it. But it is not impossible, especially if Pakistan, China, and Gulf states pile enough pressure on Tehran. Road 2. Talks collapse and war resumes. This is the darker road, and based on current signals, not a distant possibility. If Iran cannot produce a unified proposal, Trump has been explicit: the bombs come back. He said he was ready to resume bombing if talks don't go well. The U.S. military has been directed to remain ready and able. The blockade is squeezing Iran economically. Every day without a deal is another day of accumulated pressure. If war resumes, the next targets would likely be Iran's remaining infrastructure, power plants, bridges, oil facilities. The strikes would be more destructive than the first wave. Iran's ability to retaliate has been degraded, but not eliminated. If Iran fully closes the Strait of Hormuz and attacks Gulf oil infrastructure in response, the world could be looking at $150 oil. A global recession. Supply chain shocks hitting every country on Earth, including Pakistan, India, China, and Europe. Road 3. A frozen conflict. This is perhaps the most likely short-term outcome. No deal. No full resumption of war. Just a permanent state of tension. A blockade, ceasefire extensions, occasional violations, back-channel talks that go nowhere for months. Iran is politically fractured. The new supreme leader, Mojtaba Khamenei, has not fully consolidated power. The hardliners inside Iran don't want a deal. The pragmatists know Iran cannot survive prolonged war. That internal split is exactly what Trump pointed to when he said the government is seriously fractured. A frozen conflict means continued high oil prices, continued disruption in the Middle East, continued risk of the situation exploding if either side miscalculates. one wrong airstrike, one ship seized, one missile fired at the wrong target. Here is what we know for certain. The world is watching a moment that will define the next decade of global geopolitics. Iran's nuclear ambitions, the balance of power in the Middle East, the future of global oil supply, the limits of American military power, the role of Pakistan as a key mediator, the survival of the Iranian regime, all of it is suspended in this single uncertain moment. Trump's decision to extend the ceasefire is not softness. It is a calculated pause, giving Iran a narrow window to either come to the table seriously or face consequences that could erase what remains of the regime. But that window is not open forever. The Iranian government is fractured, exhausted, and under pressure from every direction. But it is also proud, ideologically rigid, and deeply resistant to what it sees as humiliation on the world stage. What happens in the next few days, whether Iran sends a delegation to Pakistan, whether a unified proposal actually emerges, whether the blockade escalates into a new flashpoint, will determine whether this war ends with a historic deal or whether it enters a catastrophic and devastating new phase. The ceasefire is holding, barely, and the clock, even without a hard deadline, is still ticking.